call the meeting of the Londonderry Budget Committee to order. We'll start with a Pledge of Allegiance. And Dan, would you lead us? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we have public comment. None is scheduled. Do we have anyone who would like to address the Budget Committee?
We have a couple minutes, I'll be glad.
We absolutely do.
Tony D. Francesco, 1 Cheshire Court. I'm here tonight because I saw your agenda, and I was interested in the item about trying to figure out the demographics of the town, or whatever it says. I don't have one in front of me. And I thought it was interesting. Originally, I thought it was a good idea, and then I started thinking about it, and I was wondering what you do with information like that, especially in light of the vote that just took place a few weeks ago that was so convoluted and hard to understand. And I just wanted to remind the board that regardless of a person's demographics, they're not necessarily going to vote their demographics. And I know you're all smart enough to know that, and I know that's probably something that you would do anyway and were going to do. As I got to thinking about it, I wanted to make it a point of public record. If for no other reason, then I can come back in February and say, remember on the first meeting when we had this chat, because sometimes you have to bring it back. You folks do such a great job of dissection and questioning and thought-provoking and for lack of a better term, beating up department heads. Sometimes you need an outside source. It's that forest for the trees kind of thing. Sometimes you need that outside source from me or several other of the folks that attend the meetings occasionally, so that to help bring you back, to help you and work with you to get you to understand that, hey, remember when we were there and we had that chat. And so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page from a standpoint of communication. I also don't want to come in here in the 11th hour the way I had to last budget cycle, and it was the 11th hour, and I felt bad about that, and I should have come in sooner to speak my mind, and for a lot of reasons I didn't, some of them good reasons, some of them just out of laziness. I was challenged to attend meetings this year, and I will do that. I will be here, but not as a thorn in your side, but as a help, or try to help. Feel free at any time to say I'm out of line. Feel free at any time to say I'm wrong. That's okay.
You're out of line and you're wrong.
Thank you. See, we're already starting off on the right foot. So, you know, that's okay. That's part of the discussion, and that's part of what I do, and that's part of who I am as a person, and that's why at meetings, you know, at some of these meetings, people see me sitting beside people chatting and laughing, and at the end of a meeting they say, wow, you two are friends? You just beat each other up at the microphone. But it has nothing to do with, it's not personal. And I said that to you folks, to some of you folks last year. So what an interesting vote we had. And I think from that vote, you almost have all the information that you need to move on to this new cycle. Statistically, you had about 50% of the people vote in favor of, let's talk about the teacher's contract. 50% just about voted in favor, and just about 50% voted against, statistically. The article passed, but for all intents and purposes, it's 50-50. But unfortunately, 85% of the people who could participate did not. What a shame. What does that mean? I don't know. You don't know. We can guess. We can argue about it. I could say that, in my opinion, and I will say, in my opinion, that tells me that 85% of the people are okay with whatever happened. I didn't care one way or the other. On Monday, I had a woman come to me at the post office that I hadn't seen in years, who put her crooked little finger in my face, because we're about the same height now, and she said, "You keep fighting for those kids. I don't have enough money, but you keep fighting for those kids because that's the right thing." If you look at her demographics, you would assume she would be in favor of a lot of no's, and apparently she was not. So all that stuff in the back of your head while you're doing all this meat and potatoes stuff, and thank you so much for doing it. I don't know why you do it. I don't know why you would want to do it. It's probably the most thankless job in the town. You got beat up on londonderry.newhampshire.net today. I just happened to pull down some of the wine line comments tonight, and you got beat up about something. I just shut it off. I didn't really pay attention to what it was.
Four
But
newspaper articles too. Don't just leave it to the
yeah,
internet.
yeah. So it's you know, in retrospect, we are all in this together. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing. Some of us are trying to get there in different ways. My concern is I don't want to go back to the 70s and 80s, when Lisa was also very politically active, because it was a nightmare in this town. We had escrow payments that could not be paid from banks and mortgage companies because the spike was so high from year to year. No one knew what the heck was going on. One year, people were getting a check back from their bank escrow company. The next year, they were having to write a check for $1,200. It was awful. I'm telling you, it was awful. And by the way, business loan percentage rates was 21%. That was my first business loan. So please don't bring us back there. One of the things that keeps us out of that scenario is the maintenance trust funds. That's part of one of the ways that we keep a relatively stable, arguably rising, tax rate, that people can kind of plan a little bit. It's a hit. For some people, it's not that much. For some people, it's a disaster. But it's not the spikes like we had in the 70s and 80s, for sure. We also went through a year of 13th month tax. 1 year, we paid 13 months of taxes. Not 12 months divided by 13, so each month is left. It was an additional month of taxes. Do you remember what year that was? I couldn't remember. I didn't have time to look it up. It was 85.
I don't remember what year, but I remember it.
Yeah, mid 80s somewhere. What an uproar. And that was because of poor fiscal management and bad planning. So we have to be really careful. While we have to be fiscally prudent, by the same token, we have to make sure that we're taking care of the farm at the same time. And that's the hardest, that's the dichotomy. That's the hardest thing that you guys have to deal with. I don't want to be having to make the decisions that you guys make. That's why I'm on this side and you're on that side. That's a really, really hard decision to make. In some aspects, it's a personal decision. Some folks have said to me, and I haven't decided which side of this fence I'm on, but some people have said to me that it should not be a personal position by a board member. That, in fact, it should be only what's good for the entire town. And that's where that phrase came from. That's not my phrase. Someone gave that to me. Someone said that to me. I just delivered it. And so here we are, at the beginning of your very long road. I wish you Godspeed, and please call, write, ask, whatever. I believe that I have a good sense of the pulse of the town. I have a good cross-section demographically of people that I know, people that I hang with, people that I socialize with, people that I see every day at the post office or whatever. So I have a good sense of what's going on where, how, and when. Understand that the 20 people that call you is a lot of people. And I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but it's statistically insignificant. I did not say 20 people are insignificant. I did not say that. What I said was statistically, that number is insignificant. To you who are getting the phone calls, it seems like a lot. But when you divide it into 15,000 taxpayers, where we know 85% of us told us they're okay. Whatever you guys decide, I'm okay with it. We know that 40% of the town don't even come into the town proper. Their house happens to be in Londonderry, but they're entering and leaving by exit 5. They're entering and leaving by exit 3. They're entering and leaving, leaving some of them through Derry, some of them through Manchester. That's a big number, 40% of the town. Look at the map. And all those outskirts, which is about 40%, never come into Londonderry proper, wherever that is. I call that 102 Mammoth Road. They never come in. They never see the signs in front of the schools. They never see the Continental flashing sign, you know, voting today or whatever. They don't see anything. Half of them don't even see political signs because the politicians don't know those streets. So keep that in mind. Have a great year. and on the you mentioned it already, Lisa. On the website, on the front page, there is the paragraph about your mission, and it's an interesting paragraph. It can be interpreted. It's pretty open. It can be interpreted anyway. You certainly know what my interpretation is. If you don't, I'll tell you. But you pretty much should know what it is. I was pretty honest about it. And you guys have to decide what yours is going to be and how you're going to handle, either individually or as a board. So I thank you very much for your service to the town, and I thank you very much for this time to speak. If you have any questions, I'll certainly answer. Sure.
Your comment about the 40% on the outer edge don't come into town,
Yeah.
Where do you get that from?
The number of homes
Mm-hmm.
is the accurate number. Whether they come into town or not is the guesstimate.
Okay, so then you're just
But I
guessing
know-
that 40% don't come in. I could guess something different.
You're right, and
Okay.
what I, yeah.
That's all. Just,
And that's my mistake. What I should have said, if I read the notes that were in my back pocket, the word before that was probably.
okay.
Probably don't. And I know some of those people.
Yeah. No, it's just that
And they have told me that they don't.
no, Saturday morning 102
Thank
is
you.
extremely busy. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd just like to make a comment on that. You had said that, if 20 people call us, it's an insignificant number.
Statistically insignificant number.
If 20 people call me and they all have the same thing to say, I don't choose to talk to the people who say one thing and not choose to talk to people who say the other. If 10 people call me and say one thing, and one person calls me and says the other, then 90% of the people who contacted me wanted me to do this.
Right. Yeah,
And
I get it.
that's how I have to take my
Sure.
statistic.
Sure. Yeah, well spoken, I agree.
I'll put three positions on the point, and I appreciate, your position, Tony, and you've been very articulate. The first is that I'm not sure 85% means indifference or apathy. I'm sure a portion of that is indifference or apathy, and people who are never going to get involved no matter what the stakes are. I think the important thing will be a year or two from now when these tax bills start coming due and people realize whether they're okay with it then or not. Because a lot of other towns in which this has been a trend for a long time, Goffstown, and even ironically enough, Bedford this year, there's been no votes unanimously. And we're talking about brain drains to Bedford. They're voting this stuff down.
Right.
So I'm curious to see what those 85% have to say a year or two from now. So I think right now, jury is out. The second thing is, the mission statement, and I think that's an important concept that we have to keep in mind. I agree with you. I think what I've kept in mind the last 2 years is what the people least able to pay are. And I know you and I disagree. I don't think that I can look at the richest folks in town, whether they have the ability to pay. They do. And to them, it's a drop in the bucket. I do have to consider the folks that can't pay. And it's easy for me. The demographic you talked about, I got 3 kids in the school. I have a decent job. It's not a big thing to me if the tax bill goes up a little bit, but some folks it is. And those are people, like Dan said, that we hear from. And the last point I guess I'll make is that, you know, I appreciate that you came in here at the outset. And one of the questions, you know, I guess what I'll challenge you to do as well is we've had a very difficult time getting to see the contracts that we're voting on, let alone be given a synopsis near the end of the run, but actually made a request to be engaged in the negotiation process so we can get educated. And we've been pushed back on both sides. I don't think that that was intentional, but I think that is a bad thing for the taxpayers. I think that if we are involved in the process and we get to read that contract, it's an important thing. So if you can challenge from that side, that we get that opportunity earlier rather than later, that would help us, and I think help you.
Yeah, and I think, and I was very vocal about, especially that teacher's contract. You guys are pretty much led on the end of a gangplank on that one. It came in way too late, with way too little information. In the 11th hour, it was past the 11th hour at that point, and I thought that was unfair. And
1 o'clock in the morning.
there you go.
And now what it is what it is.
Yeah.
It'll be 3 years before you get another opportunity to revisit it.
Right. And so, you know, that's water over the dam. We're done. I can continue to talk about it if you want. I think that's water over the dam. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I'll give you a minute. And
Sure.
in going forward, I'll listen to whatever anybody has to say on either side of an issue. The only thing I will not put any credence in is an anonymous posting on a blog. I think it's divisive. I think if somebody lacks the courage to come in and take a position, they lose the ability to participate. I have no problem with somebody disagreeing with any member of this board, including me. Everybody's going to have different opinions, and the teachers got their contract. That's democracy.
Sure.
I mean, if 85% chose not to vote, that's the way the system works.
Right.
But I think that, you know, when you say that there's been, you know, people taking shots at us, I'd like to see the anonymity in that process stop.
As would I, and I've had that conversation in the last 2 weeks about that, because I'm not going to use the right word, but it's destructive to the fabric of the town. There's a better way to say that, but off the top of my head, it's destructive. I think it creates the wrong impression. I think it empowers the wrong people for the wrong reasons. It really doesn't serve anybody anything. And
I just think it
I'm
discourages people from running, and I thank Bill for stepping up
Sure.
and throwing his hat in the ring. But, you know,
Yeah.
when people start taking shots at each other and they don't stand behind their conviction, they can be more cavalier about what they say.
Sure.
And so I don't choose to put any credence, let alone read that kind of commentary.
And I'm certainly glad to hear that, and I'm glad you made it a public record. And I had assumed it was like that for the board all along. I had no doubts about that. I mean, no doubt about it. One thing, if I can respond to the
Sure.
lower end demographic, I agree with you 100%. And I took a hit when the person wrote their name, and I thanked him for writing his name. And I'm telling you that I agree with you. We have to protect those folks, but we have to be careful of how expensive it's going to be to do that and at what cost. We can't abandon, I'm making stuff up. We can't abandon a maintenance trust fund because 25% of the town or even 30% of the town can't afford it, because that hurts the other 70%. And it's actually going to hurt those 30% of the people later on down the road, because that stuff is going to get done. It has to. It's not a question of will it get done, it has to get done. You can't let a building crumble. You can't put public works out in vehicles that aren't safe. And so that truck is gonna get bought, you know, at some point. And that's part of the fiscal responsibility part that's in your charter, on the front page there. That's part of the, let's try and continue to keep it level. You know, let's not get back to those spikes. You know, and some of these other towns like Bedford and Amherst and Wyndham, they're gonna end up with spikes because they just voted everything down. Well, those things they're gonna get in. You know, we built a middle school in this town for 28% more than the first time it was proposed. It was,
And if I could add, South School was worse, because that kept being delayed and it kept being
Right.
delayed. These maintenance projects, when they are delayed, wind up costing the taxpayer more money. And so there's not really, in the long run, a savings. I am the one lonely vote on the budget committee
Right.
that supported these when you saw the 6-1 votes.
Right.
And I agree with you that the maintenance trust funds are absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Can we pare some of those projects back? Yes. Can we postpone them indefinitely? No. We have a tremendous investment in our capital assets. We have millions of dollars worth of buildings. And to not protect that investment for the children, for the parents, and for the taxpayer is, in my view, it's not a responsible way to deal with it. So those maintenance trust funds were put into place for exactly that purpose, that the taxpayer could see this level funding, more or less level year to year, and the overall impact would not be the spikes that you're addressing that we suffered through in the past. So-
And
Well,
I think that, you know, to me, that one article was one of our missteps personally. But it wasn't that I didn't want the trust fund, it was that I wanted it to be 100,000. And we couldn't get the town council to move on that, so it's not that we didn't want it, so we didn't want it at the level it was at least for me.
That's exactly it. I think that on the particular article, it was almost cryptic.
Right.
They had things in there that they planned to do with it, that they weren't telling people that's what it was in there for. It wasn't that that we wanted to vote down a maintenance trust fund, we just thought that was a large number. And, you know, if there was a project that you were looking to do in that, why didn't you mention that?
Yeah, and that was mentioned, at the deliberative session. I think you said that, you know, we don't get to participate in making the number. We can just vote up or vote down the number. That's basically, you know, all you could do at that point.
And that was true with the contract, too. I mean, I made a point that I'm not saying the teachers weren't entitled to a raise. I just thought that the amount negotiated was a little too rich for the time. I see our mission is partly, is to use a bad analogy, is triage. I mean, we didn't vote everything down. There are towns out in the western part of the state in which the budget committee comes in and says no to everything. I think this year was difficult for us because we said we do have to trim the budget or keep it, you know, within a reasonable growth, and we had to prioritize. The policy statements, I think, are made by the school board and the town council.
Sure.
We then have to look at what their policy considerations are and say, this is where we feel the money is best spent, and that's the taxpayer perspective. So I think that what gets lost in the equation, and especially when you go to the polls, is that we're voting yes on some, no on others, in a sense of we think that this is what needs to be done immediately versus something that can wait till the next year, not perhaps forever. And the last thing I'll say is, I'm going to skip back, is, you know, you mentioned that you took some hits too, and I'm as vociferous in saying anonymous attacks against somebody who disagrees with me are equally as wrong.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think that it ought to be.
And I mean, that's a chance you take. When you go into a public forum, that's a chance you take. I knew that going in.
Oh, I got thick skin.
And
In my line of work, I get called a lot worse by a lot worse people, but I just think it really stifles people wanting to participate, and I've heard that, and it's unfortunate.
And
I'd like-
it's not,
I'm sorry.
sorry, Tom, go ahead.
I'd like to take you to task for a minute.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do it.
He asked you to.
Do it.
There's been a comment attributed to you about, what was the actual words now? Something about, you're tired of hearing about the elderly and the poor.
Yes,
Well, I fall into one of those categories.
sure.
So, took a little exception. What I was hoping that could have been turned into was a thank you to the elderly, because I would dare say that possibly the elderly were the ones that built and paid for this wonderful school system we have. So just,
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely, and understand, I said that at the deliberative session, but that's out of context. Well, all the parts that came after that,
it's all,
of
I
course,
wasn't there, so
of
I
course,
just said it was a
weren't
tribute.
printed. And that's okay, again, that's what happens, that's a chance you take when you're in a public forum. The press is gonna do what they have to say. I did say that, but I continued on
I'll still take it.
in the statement, and
Being
that's
part of
okay.
that,
And that's
ultimately.
okay, it's, I mean, it's fair, you know, and I took hits from, you know, quite a few other people as well. And that's okay, because I did say that. However, out of context, it sounds really bad. The way I said it,
That's why I took exception.
exactly, of course.
And not to jump on the bandwagon, but a couple of the quotes you attributed to board members were out of context as well, in the larger discussion. I mean,
Yeah,
there was-
I have to say,
there was a quote
that
attributable-
I watched I went to the cable studio, paid $5 to buy the disc of the meeting,
Let me just give you the
watched
example.
the meeting, and I have them right here, too.
Let me give you the example I'm thinking about. You said that
Sure.
it was almost described as a cavalier comment that, you know, we don't care, the voters will decide. I think at the end of the discussion, we were told, you're wrong. And we said, we may be wrong. We're making a decision based on what we know. The voters may tell us they disagree. So I think in the larger context, that statement was not as it came about. And I'm not sure you intended it that way, but that's the
No,
way
but
it was
again,
heard.
but again, the rest of the statement was, you don't understand the power that you have, because by,
Apparently we
Which is
don't.
obvious-
Apparently we don't.
Obviously isn't anywhere near what you think.
Voted down.
Your biggest argument was that nobody ever votes
I don't
against
wanna-
the vote
Yeah,
of the budget
exactly.
committee. and
Tony, I don't
everybody
want to
did
hear that
exactly
argument next
and
year.
you
okay?
can't,
They
you
didn't
can't now. You
entirely
can't
do
now,
that.
it's over, and attorneys do that all the time in court, because once.
Don't trust
Once they
attorneys.
get a professional
Right?
witness, they gotta discredit them in the previous year. So now we set history, now I can't say that anymore.
First he
So-
went after the elderly, now he's going after attorneys.
So,
Influence will influence people.
so what, so the point was, that because of your power, when you, pretty much, prior to last year, if you vote an article down, that's pretty much how people are gonna vote, because of the lack of participation. Even with TV, people don't watch on the TV. You know, people look in on the thing, and it says, even though it's very poorly written, and I talked to Todd about that, which is why he wrote the letter to the editor that he wrote, about how it says, the planning board approves, the budget committee approves
1-6.
1-6.
I had so many people so upset about that, it wasn't even funny.
Anyway, and that's why Todd wrote the article that he wrote, so.
I think they get that from DRA, though.
They do, and that,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
The
that's the
town
problem.
side is
They-
written
they-
differently.
Right, exactly. So, at any rate, I lost the point. What were we talking about?
Context.
Yeah, but which context? It was,
The
Power.
the
power.
point,
have the
yeah,
power.
the point of the power. If you want the people to vote with an unbiased opinion or on their own, then take no vote. Don't vote at all. Now the people really have an unbiased opinion. They have zero opinion.
But in that
It's
sense,
not a
then why
biased
wouldn't
Why,
we just
why
dissolve
be
the
here
committee
then?
and
Why
let the
be
committee
here
figure it
then?
out for
No,
themselves?
but yeah, but
only biased
when
if
you're in a position where you're gonna say,
Well,
then
that
let
goes
the
up and
people
up
Wait,
and
let him
decide.
finish, one at a time,
Let
please.
the people decide. They're not really deciding if you vote either way. Whether you vote 100% for or 100% against, you're skewing the data, because there's a lot of people that vote whichever way you guys vote. And if you truly want a representative sample of how are they gonna, what do they really think, then take a no vote. And now they're gonna
Under that
vote.
premise, we
not-
Yeah, wait,
Well,
Tom,
that
Tom, let Tom speak.
Only
One
only
at
for
a time,
that
please.
one time when you're confused, or when you're saying, we're gonna let the voters decide. That's how this whole thing came out. I'm not saying one where you're definitely this, or you're definitely that, or you're definitely the other thing. You guys were in conflict, and you didn't quite know what to do, and I challenged you, and the answer was, well, we're gonna let the voters decide. And my opinion is, you're really not. Once that vote is there, it's tainted.
Okay, Tony, let me just
Sure.
let Tom
Go ahead.
respond.
That's okay.
Are you good, okay? And Dan?
That being the case, I had to go to the poll and I had to vote, and I was still conflicted, but I still voted. I just didn't leave it blank because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
That's how democracy works. I put out what my opinion of something is, and somebody either votes for me because they think that I'm going to vote the way that they would, or they don't vote for me because they don't like the way that I do it. That's just how it works.
Sure, that's fair.
I can't just say no. Somebody voted me in here to offer my opinion,
Yeah.
even when I'm on the fence with it.
I think that premise defeats the whole purpose of having a budget committee. I think we'd be remiss not to vote. And I think we need to vote based on what our individual consciences are. I think we're akin to a jury. You don't go into a jury room and say, well, you 11 decide, I can't really make up my mind, so I'm gonna sit in the corner.
Yeah, but there's hung juries, and then,
But you take, but somebody takes a vote. You get a hung jury because it's 6-6 or it's, 9-3. You don't not vote. I mean, otherwise, there'd be no purpose here. I voted, and I'll go on the record, I voted in the ballot the same way I voted on Budget Committee. And I didn't vote based on my personal belief. I have plenty of friends that are teachers. And I didn't vote,
and you were very clear about that. You said that at the deliberative session as well.
I think in the long run, frankly, it was unwise. It won. I'm not sour grapes about it. I mean, I've heard people out there saying the teachers' union turned out with all their relatives, and that's what swung it. If it is, that's democracy. They're taxpayers, they're voters, they get a right to do that. But I voted based on what I think is the long-term best interest of this town. And I think that, if I'm betting, there'll be some pushback. And whether that means down the road we're laying off younger teachers that we want to keep, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But I would have been more comfortable and perhaps voted for a more modest salary increase.
Okay, let's
And,
go to Chris now, because Chris has it. Oh,
Can I
okay,
finish?
beg your pardon. Yeah.
And I think that would have been more palatable to me. So I voted the way that I felt was in the best interest of everyone.
Okay, Chris?
So many different thoughts. Just as far as
Rehashing.
as far as any listening to the budget committee or not listening to the budget committee, on the town side, for the most part, they did listen to the majority of the budget committee, even though I was in the minority on some of those. For the most part, they did. School side, again, we can surmise that teachers showed up and voted for their stuff, which is fine. That's why they got rid of town meetings, because unions were showing up to vote for their stuff. As far as anonymous comments we were discussing, there's a lot of them. We had 2 open positions on the budget committee and 1 person ran for both. And people are so upset.
And he bought signs.
Someone could have come on here, they could have tried. I understand people didn't like a lot of our votes, but they could have run. There's now 5 of us out of the 7 on this committee that ran unopposed. Obviously, it's not a glamorous position people want to be on. People talk about, you said, hearing from 20 people and listening to them. I heard from 1 person. 1 person.
And
Besides people that were here.
And it's so important. What you guys provide to the town is so important. It's almost more important than any of the other committees, because you are supposed to be, and most of the time are, the voice of reason. You are the citizen advocates. You are the ones that have taken the budgets apart, inside and out, backwards and forwards, to give that opinion to the citizens, to say, hey, I know, I looked at all that stuff, here's my opinion. It's so important, that value is there.
Well, the interesting thing is what the mission statement says. We straddle both sides of this town. We do the school and the town, and that's unique. But the irony is, last year, I heard from people that accused us of being a rubber stamp. And this year, we're accused for, taking a position. So you're not going to please folks, and that's why it's been my mindset to vote what I think is in the long-term best interest of the town, and to triage what we do need
Yeah.
now.
And I remember you actually said that to me after the meeting was over in the deliberative session, and I did have a comment on that, and it was, and my thought was, it's okay to be a rubber stamp if, in fact, everyone has done their due diligence. Because the department heads now know the budget committee's coming. We better sharpen our pencil. And they do, you have to admit, they do a pretty good job. You guys push back, you have the tug-of-war thing. It's a beautiful thing. You know, what a great system. But when you're at that point, you know, it's okay to okay everything. That's fine. And if people are going to challenge you on being a rubber stamp for the betterment of the town, so be it.
It's interesting you bring that up. I'll give you three things that I didn't mention earlier. I didn't take that decision lightly. I actually talked to a school board member from out in SAU 1. They've rejected the teacher's contract 4 years running, according to what he told me. Somebody who's on the school board and negotiated for the school board side in New Boston told me they agreed last year to a 0-1-1 for teachers, and this year for support 0-1-1. So that's kind of the pulse that I took of other communities. I happen to sit on the State Post-Secondary Education Commission, so I'm no anti-education crusader. And because of the state budget, we don't exist anymore. We're being folded into perhaps the Department of Education. So there are plenty of other places taking cut, and one of my cuts and one of my drum beats this year was we weren't asking the teachers to take cuts. We were just asking them to take a smaller raise. That was my perspective.
Sure.
So, and it was painted much differently, and I understand passions, become involved when people's pocketbooks and livelihoods are at issue, but I don't think the way that it was portrayed was productive to the dialogue. And I think this dialogue has to go forward on other contracts, not just the teachers. So I'm not singling them out.
Could we just have Chris finish, because I'm not sure, are you done?
I know that Chris
Do you have
wants to
more?
finish it.
I'm not done, but Dan can go first.
I know that Chris wants to finish his thought, but all I'd like to say is that we could sit here all night, and we could have some excellent dialogue about everything that we did last year. But I think that it would be fair for the two new members of the Budget Committee and for us to just move along and look to the future instead of rehashing the past.
Yeah, I agree.
Why don't we do that? You
Okay,
go
but
ahead
I'm
and finish
finishing my thought first.
your thought.
The rest of my thought was, even though I only heard from one person before we voted, I heard from multiple people after we voted. And the majority of those people said and felt that it was not our job to look out for one group of people. It was to look out for the entire town and what's best for the town and property values and everything else. And for me, as one board member, that's how I am going forward for the new year, is the town as a whole and not the people who are in the bottom 10%. We have to look at everything individually. I think there was an overwhelming message that said we need to support the schools. Doesn't mean we're going to rubber stamp everything that comes in the school this year. We're still going to ask all those questions. We know for a fact before we get to next November that enrollment's going to be down again. It's not going to go up this year. We know that. There's going to have to be more cuts made. But that's it. I just, we kind of skipped around the agenda, especially with the mission statement. To me, I think I'm going to be changing my interpretation of the mission statement a little bit this year as opposed to last year.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity. I certainly appreciate it, and good luck to you. And again, thank you very much for all you do. I appreciate
Tony, I would encourage you to stay for the discussion. Here's an agenda
Okay.
for you. I apologize for not having that a little closer and more immediately available.
Out early, huh?
So, I know, seriously.
So did I.
Gentlemen, I do apologize, the agenda does not include the minutes which have been distributed. So for those members who served on last year, the former Budget Committee, I'd like a motion to adopt the draft minutes of January 26th.
I will make a motion to adopt the January 26 minutes.
Okay,
Second.
so that's Dan, and who seconded, Tom? Thank you, Tom. So I have a motion and a second. I'm going to make an amendment that it should be January 26, 2012. The secretary did a cut and paste and missed the 12.
No, I'm not going to second that. I like it like that.
I will second the
Oh, thank you.
That shows the excellence of human error.
Yes. So I now have a motion and a second for the adoption of the minutes of January 26, 2012 as amended. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? No, so that's 5.
and 2 abstentions.
And 2 abstentions. Great. So moving along, we have election of officers, followed by scope and mission of the Budget Committee. So I hope, Tony, you're going to stay for that. Then we have, just for those watching, we're gonna have a discussion of special meetings that we discuss during the budget process, things such as overtime and other issues that were raised that possibly the committee could use this slow season to get more input from department heads, and if there's an interest in doing that, we can schedule those. And timely delivery of budget books. And the last item is develop method to assess relative economic standing of the Londonderry taxpayer. So let's start with the election of officers. I will now take nominations for the position of chair.
Before we do that, just for the
Yes.
agenda, we need to add also liaison assignments.
Oh, you want to do those this evening? Okay,
I think we probably need to, right?
yeah.
A liaison.
Well, we can do it this evening or later.
We could. Last year, we didn't have one till August, so I was just thinking now we on a wild
Right,
panel
may-
this year, but
Oh, I see what you're saying,
I just didn't
because,
we can discuss it, okay.
okay, we can just, we'll have that down as a discussion of the last item. So right now, we have election of officers. We'll have chair, vice chair, and secretary. Tom?
I'd like to nominate
Okay, Tom?
Dan for chairman.
Great.
I'll second it.
And Marty. I have a motion and a second. Are there other nominations?
I'll make a motion for John as chair.
Is there a second? I don't hear a second. So,
As a nominee, I'd rather abstain.
oh, no, I'm not asking you, I'm just glancing at you. I wasn't trying to pressure you in that way.
I'll second it.
Okay, so Marty is gonna second the nomination of John Kern. So we have two candidates for chair, Dan Lekas and John Curran. Would all those in favor of Dan Lekas as chairman of the Londonderry Budget Committee say aye?
Aye.
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 So how many votes? I'm sorry, how many?
Three.
Three. And all those opposed?
Nay.
So that's 3-2. I voted for Dan.
You said aye.
Yeah, so how many, so can I just have how many
Dan
people
and
voted
John
for
can
Dan?
vote too, can't they? Or do you wanna do that?
I'm not, if I'm a candidate, I'm not going to.
Well, you can vote for yourself.
yourself,
Yeah, you can vote for yourself, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you have to,
You can
have
vote
to-
for yourself.
You have to participate, because
just
it's
told
a
you you have to
six,
vote.
it's a
I vote for me,
3-3
you
vote.
vote for you.
Okay.
Well, you want to vote for me and I'll vote for you?
It's a little incestuous.
Ooh.
So I have Marty, Lisa, and who else? Tom voted for Dan? Tom. And for John Curran?
Aye.
John, Chris, and
Bill.
Bill, sorry, I'm blanking on you. It's the first meeting.
Don't worry, by the end of the year, everyone will know you.
Okay,
This is the quiet corner.
Like cheers.
so we're currently at impasse, is that correct?
No.
No.
It shouldn't be an
Dan
impasse
wins.
if we have 7.
Okay, so define the vote for me again.
If Dan votes, it will be 4. If Dan's not gonna vote, we're gonna be in an impasse.
Dan, would you reconsider taking a position on this very important vote?
Huh?
Otherwise, we're tied. And that's the beauty of
Otherwise,
it.
we need to nominate somebody
Have another
else.
vote?
Okay, so
It's not
take the
gonna
votes
change.
again, okay?
Why not?
Okay, so, okay, this is fascinating.
Well,
So all those in favor of the nomination of Dan Lekas as chair of the Budget Committee, raise your hand so I can see you. So there's Tom, Lisa, Marty,
okay,
and Dan. Thank you.
now it'll be a majority.
So there's 4. Yes, and so that's a, that's a
Correct.
de facto majority unless there are other votes that would change. Okay, so, Mr. Lekas, I hand you the gavel.
Do we have any nominees for vice chair?
We'll nominate John Curran for vice chair.
I'll second it.
I'll put Lisa's name into nomination so we have some competition.
Do we have a second for Lisa?
Sure.
Okay, we have a second for Lisa. Are all those in favor of John Curran?
Aye.
Aye.
2, 3, that is 4 in favor of John Curran.
Okay,
By de facto, that would be John Curran as
John
vice
Curran
chair.
as vice chair.
Do we have a nomination for Martin Strugus for secretary?
I nominate Martin Sturgis for secretary.
We have a 1 and we have a 2. All those in favor?
A big nay.
Aye. Can we
Big
just pay
name.
Tony the dollar that we get for the committee?
Martin Strugus as secretary.
Oh, gee, thanks.
What are we saying about stepping forward and back?
Did you just see democracy at work there, or what?
I knew this much fun, I would've come every meeting.
No, he just picked
We
the
are a
tall-
fun board.
He just picked
This
the
is a
tallest
good
guy,
I
that's
have a
all.
feeling the other ones are gonna be more fun too this year.
You know, it's the,
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Next new order of business would be the scope and mission of the Budget Committee. I believe does somebody want to actually read the mission? I assume everybody has.
I'd rather not read it out loud, but if somebody wants to.
Do you want to read it into the record, just for,
Can we just attach it to the record?
We could attach it to the record.
oh,
but-
that would be, okay. Well, I was just wondering for people watching.
This is
on
the same
TV.
one on the town website.
This is
under
copied
budget.
again.
I think it is
Exactly.
exactly
It
cut
is
and
exactly-
pasted from
That's
that.
exactly where we got it from, so thanks, Chris, for
oh,
printing that off.
Does anyone have any discussion on it?
yeah. Well, I highlighted a couple of things. I think the first thing says the Budget Committee has a unique vantage point in the budget process as it is chartered to review both the town and the school district's financial needs and offer its recommendations to those entities. The question I have is what does that mean, offer its recommendations? Because there was some discussion about the Budget Committee offering its own default budget for both. Is that the way people would take it? I'm not, you know,
We'd have to have a charter change.
I
to
think
do
it's
that.
on a budgetary, you'd have to have a budgetary, how is it termed in the statute? Budgetary,
We just call it a
We
budget
would have to
committee with
actually
teeth,
change
but
the
right,
statute.
you have to change the charter to do
it's,
that.
I
Okay.
know what you're trying to say.
so
I
then the
can't think of it.
recommendation is
Municipal budget
either voting
committee.
up or down.
Municipal,
We're
yes.
basically a board of opinion.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think that was made very clear to us this year too, for some of our conversations.
A lot of things that were
We
made
were
very
welcome to
clear
give
to
our
us this year.
opinion, but it wasn't
There
necessarily.
are some
Okay.
towns that actually draft the budget.
Yes, I know.
Rather, yeah.
Bo's Budget Committee has the power of no, and they've used it a couple of times now in the past.
Now, John, you mentioned the change to the charter earlier. Did you want to address that in this portion of the discussion?
No, I mean, it came up last year because there were discussions that made it, you know, I mean, in my line of work, sometimes go back to the elements. You know, what is required here? And, you know, what is our scope? I mean, that was kind of a discussion we had. And is that something that going forward, it wouldn't be something that would go into effect this year or maybe even next year, but is that something that you want to put out as dialogue as part of the process this year?
Can you clarify, I'm trying to recall our discussion of that. Was it for those communities that are under the rubric of a city rather than a town? Was that one of the stumbling blocks under our charter?
No, I think you can't, in my understanding is you can go back and reform and do that. It's just a conscious choice, and it has to be a referendum or a vote of the taxpayers.
And what would be the precise change in the charter?
But what it does is it takes the creation of budget away from the department heads
Yeah.
and away from, you know, town manager, school board, and puts it in the hands
Superintendent,
of the budget committee.
right,
And
yeah.
The budget committee actually puts together the proposals on the numbers.
And
makes
what is the
recommendations.
precise change to the charter?
I'd have to go back
We
and look at this.
discussed
I'd have
this.
to go back and look at the statute.
Okay.
We did talk about it, the
That was
provision.
what we were, yeah, we were trying to define.
I thought we decided we might need to open the whole charter, depending on what.
I think
Yeah,
you do.
Lots said,
Well, maybe
That
not
would be the
the whole
issue.
charter, but you certainly have to, it's a creature of statute, so you have to
Mm-hmm.
go back and allow the taxpayers to say, that's what we want to do or we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure what the answer is. I mean, I threw it out for, you know, just dialogue.
Yeah, yeah. no,
It was
very
definitely
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
Anybody have any other comments on that?
Not on
Martin?
the first part, going further into the thing. It says, the committee's goal is to ensure that the budgets of both the superintendent of schools and the town manager provide taxpayers with, in quotes, adequate town and school services and the necessary infrastructure to operate in a physically responsible manner. The question is who defines adequate?
Well, I think that's
You know,
a
because
consensus.
That would be the voters.
Anyone in education is rolling on the floor right now.
The Supreme Court, according to Claremont, 1, 2, and 3.
Well, certainly on the town side.
For 20 years I've been trying to find adequate.
And we thought the Augenblick formula did that 20 years ago.
Well, that's a flawed formula anyway, but, no, I was just curious to see, you know, as people criticized about the school budget and your vote, you know, some people said it was adequate, others said no. And, you know, as far as I saw the school budget this year was that there were no programs cut, there were no teachers cut, everything was intact. The only difference was pay increase, that was it. So, you know, just, you know, and then, of course, the last thing here is about the stable tax bill. Learning the hard way, that usually means a steady, as Tony pointed out, it's a steady 3%, 2 to 3% every year going up steadily. And my concern always is, well, does the taxpayer, the majority of the people who are working out there and voting, do they have that kind of a steady income going up, you know, to match it, so to speak? But that's what I was looking at when I was at the budget hearings and listening to that, and I didn't see that in the last year or so, but just curious to see what the, you know, I'm always looking for what that stable tax rate is.
Well, I think we were discussing the institution of the maintenance trust funds and the capital
I support
equipment
those.
funds as a way of keeping that stable, so that when you need to buy a new fire engine that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, that's something that's been planned for.
Yes.
And we get a slow ramp up on those large outlays rather than the sudden,
Right. Being involved over the years in maintenance issues, I have no quarrel with that, because over the years, I've always voted for the maintenance budgets to be able to buy the fire truck, you know, and all the other maintenance equipments. As Tony pointed out, you don't want to let the, as you also pointed out, that you don't want the buildings to fall apart. They have to be painted, they have to be fixed, all that. And that only represents 20% of the whole budget. You know, let's face it, on the town and the school side, 80 to 85% of the budget is labor cost.
I think that the matter of the mission is it's based on opinion, and anybody you ask would probably have a different one of what exactly it is. And yeah, I mean, we could scrutinize it all day, but to ask the next person over, it would be completely different to them.
but I think as a budget committee, and I know, Marty, you've been in this process for a long time, and you're very loyal and paying a lot of attention here. Adequate is really defined by those voters who do show up at the polls and who do come to the meetings and address the department heads and address the budget committee. When the budget committee votes one way and the taxpayers say, we don't agree with you, okay, they are defining their version of adequate, and that's what the town's gonna go with. And I think people are speaking with a very clear voice. I like the fact that we're not a unanimous committee. I like the fact that we have, you know, the 3 losing votes, or 2 losing votes, or 1 losing vote. I like the fact that everyone up here is comfortable taking a stand and carrying their point of view forward, whether or not it agrees with the rest of the committee or not. And I think that's one of the strengths of the process. But adequate is finally and ultimately defined by the residents of this community who show up and vote at those meetings. So I think that's how we as a committee view adequate under this definition.
Well, I think one of the biggest controversies is always, you know, I think you guys suffered a lot of that, you know, people were saying, well, that's not adequate, you know, and that's where everybody disagrees. And a lot of people took you to task for that, and like you said, it's just a difference of opinion. And, you know, I wish people were a little more respectful of that versus, you know, the attacks sometimes, but.
But I think
Oh,
people.
hold on,
sorry.
Lisa.
It's relatively simple. You make a decision, somebody's gonna be happy, somebody isn't.
Yeah, true.
It's not a big deal. Criticism's fine. Except for Tony, talking about the old people.
Lisa,
No, I think I'm good.
okay. Did anybody else have any more comments on the mission?
No, we're ultimately advisory. That's it. You
Exactly.
know? I mean, we don't have the power to formulate the numbers, and we don't have the power to pass the budget as proposed.
Or we just give our opinion and people beat us for it.
Advise and dissent, yeah.
All right.
So if we move along, we have meetings with the department heads for overtime and other issues. I know that the overtime on some of the things was a large issue in the last, how soon would you want to meet with them, though?
I don't know what the schedule's gonna be. You know, if we're gonna wait till like August or September to come back into this thing like we did last year, that would be then the time. And I think that there's more to this than an overtime issue. I think part of what has got to be done, and I think what we need to do is ask these department heads, along with somebody that represents the union, to give us a path to be able to put more people in place and reduce some of these costs. Part of the problem right now, as I see it, is just overtime and debt service is now accounting for 15% of our town budget. That's a lot of money.
I think I'd have to agree with John when he says that. I'd like to see it out in writing and see exactly what the contract is.
Well,
Do they have like a guaranteed overtime clause within their
What I think you need to include both the union reps, the department heads, and kind of throw the ball back in their court and say to them very simply, if you've put a stumbling block in the way of adding these because of these particular situations, at least get it out in the open. But can you come up with a plan that's going to allow us to staff the police and fire to a better number than we have currently? And if we can do that, does it reduce these this overtime? Right now, I think it's $1.2 million or $3 million is what's being spent on a $25,000 or $26,000 budget. It's almost 5%. That's a lot of money. And then when you couple that with just our debt service, now we're talking 15%. So we're working with 85-cent dollars. Let's ask them to try to, again, give us the pathway, or give the town council the pathway, or give everybody the knowledge to be able to come up with a way that doesn't break the bank and makes it much more palatable to everybody to put this whole thing together. Some of the answers in just a few questions I got were, well, you can't do that because that's the contract. Well, let's ask the union what you can do. And maybe they can work within the framework of trying to do it a little bit different. You know, if everybody thinks it might be broke, you can't use the same thinking that got it broke to get it fixed. We got to look at some other avenue. That's all I would just like to hear how they would propose to do it, besides the fact just throw 5 more guys on and it'll cost you another $100,000 in overtime and blah, blah, blah. To me, that's what soured, I think, people on that. It was just the way it was written and how it came across.
Okay.
So I think it would be very prudent to bring in the department heads along with the union reps or with somebody that represents them to explain these things, and then to ask their help in trying to set up a way to go about expanding these 2 different departments that we need some people on.
John and then Marty.
I think the discussion was during the budget review process was to do this after the vote. So I've always thought in the past 2 years we do ourselves a disservice by electing officers and then going into hibernation until October, November. I really think we ought to strive, the website says we meet the fourth Thursday of every month, thank you. Even if we miss one of those, I'd be in favor of meeting over the summer to kind of get some traction and these issues that we always say, I wish we had more time for this, that we do it now. One of the best resources I had this year, and everybody's got their pet project, all the departments want to advocate for their people and in their budgets. The best resource I had, and I alluded to with Tony, I called people from other towns, school boards, and it dawned on me, talk to budget committee members from other towns. They have to be going through the same heartburn that we do, and comparing notes with people that are doing the same thing on another front. I think that's a productive thing. That's a personal thing, but one of the things, and I'm going to be a iconoclast, I guess, and maybe be the subject of more blog writing, but I've always scratched my head why we don't use part-timers on some of these departments. I deal with police officers day in and day out. There are certified police officers, some of them retired, who do part-time hours. We had, and I voted for the call firefighters last year, or the budget cycle before this past one. I think that's a no-brainer. I mean, what bang for the buck? You pay somebody who shows up and does the job and does it enthusiastically. And not that the folks working full-time don't, but as a supplement, I've always wondered why we don't use part-time.
We didn't hear a lot about that this year.
No, we didn't. We
That
didn't.
was one of the things we were told you couldn't have because of the contract.
Well, and I'd be curious to see the contract, because this is one of the things. We're told things are in contracts, and, you know, I trust they're telling us accurately, but perhaps there's room for interpretation when you look at it. Maybe that clause isn't as airtight as you thought. So that's one thing I'd like to at least hear from the department heads. Why can't, you know, our part-time firefighters, police officers, hiring summer kids for DPW, why is that off limits? Because you don't have retirement. You're not paying them a time and a half. I know Auburn has part-time police officers, because I know one of them, and I know some of the other towns do. So, you know, that's one thing that I'd propose asking if we do get into some discussions on overtime. I think it could save us some money.
Marty?
Well, being a department head, I run into this problem a lot. You have certain segments, well, I have people who work 40 hours, 37 and a half, and then there's part-timers. My skilled staff, which is the cooks, they work 40 hours. If somebody's out sick or somebody's on vacation, the only choice I have is to put another cook in there, which means overtime automatically. Because the part-timers, you generally don't hire a cook part-time to do, in my case, food service work, because the amount you're paying him for what skill you need, the two don't match. And so I think that's where the fire department runs into. Because those folks are working 2 days, 24 hours. And so as soon as they work another shift, that's automatically into the overtime. The only way to solve that is what you said, is a part-time firefighter. Now, the only way you can do that, or even help that, would be is, you know when people take vacations and sometimes off, but what happens when they're sick? You know, you just don't know when that's going to happen. Somebody gets hurt on a fire, you have to replace them on the crew. You know, you can't just leave it empty. So that's where the problem comes in. And also, you know, the firefighter has to keep up on the training. The call firefighters, I think, in town do well. I've talked to Vinnie Curro on these things. And, you know, I think that could fill some of the role, but I don't know if we could do the whole thing, though.
Lisa?
You can always ask.
On the issue of the part-timers, my recollection of the explanation was the training required to bring those people up to speed. And I think we can certainly say that in an area like firefighting, the training and having a person who's right on the target for the information that they need and the expertise that they carry in is very important. In response to John's comment about bringing in young people part-time in the summer for DPW, my tendency would be to think that Janos would probably say, we don't want them driving our expensive equipment, summertime or not. It might not be the best use of taxpayer funds to pay someone lower a rate and then have one of those vehicles get into serious trouble. The other issue that I wanted to address was bringing in the union reps and contracts. I don't know that the Budget Committee has in years past asked union reps to come forward and meet with us. And I certainly know that the Budget Committee has not had an impact on contract negotiations. I would need to hear from both the town and the school that they felt that this was an appropriate role for the Budget Committee to play. We are tasked with viewing the budget and the process. And while we can certainly have input to the town and school negotiators, the idea of having union reps come in and justify anything to us strikes me as just odd. It does not seem to suit.
Yeah, I don't think you can do that.
I don't think
That contract.
Just a minute. John?
And I was an advocate in bringing in union representatives, I think department heads, because we have no authority to ask to even compel them if they said no. I mean, if they wanted to come in just like any member of the public, and have a dialogue with us about it and educate us, that's fine. But the department heads and the employees of the town have a statutory duty to educate us and inform us and apprise us on these issues, anything related to the budget, and this certainly does, because we heard from everybody, they're wringing their hands and saying, overtime's out of control, we gotta be able to pay for this, it's beyond what we have allocated.
Well, that's why I
So I
recommended
think
that we
it-
have
yeah.
these meetings.
But I
at
think it
this
is
time.
timely. I'll give you an example of where it's gonna be one of these situations where people are gonna have different opinions. On the county and the state level, there are people retiring, collecting their pension, and then going back to work for the same entity as a part-timer without getting pay into the pension, without getting benefits, because they like the job. They wanted to lock in the pension, because who the heck knows what, the department is gonna do up there with their pension next year. So they get out now. And there's been a pushback at the state level saying, that's double dipping, and that's unfair. And I had a department head on the county level tell me, I have a guy who's trained to do this job, and he's certified to do this job, and I can put him in there and I can save the county money. And they would have no complaint if I hired the same guy who did the job in Massachusetts. It's the fact that he's drawing on the New Hampshire retirement system and collecting a paycheck. Those scenarios, I think, exist. And if you educate the taxpayer that, yeah, it is technically double dipping, but so what? It's a known quantity. It's saving us money in the long run. Those are the types of dialogues I think we should have. And I think that department heads might be open to having somebody serve in that capacity that they were familiar with. A guy who just went out on retirement, a guy from the adjacent town who they've had dealings with. So, I mean, I'm not advocating that, inviting unions.
Okay,
We
good,
have some of
that
that
that was a
You
red
do,
flag
and you
for
do
me.
have that. And I think that that's something that, perhaps we should see more of.
And Marty?
I was gonna agree with Lisa, saying that's a condition of work, and that's usually negotiated between the union and the town. I think our role is at the end of it, at the end of that process where they present the contract, and then we can say overall, up or down, and give our reasons why, because we think it's too expensive for the town, this or that. Or you can, obviously not in front of the budget committee, but you can, as a taxpayer, go before the town council and say, you think this contract's too expensive. I think that would be the way to go with it. But I think you attempted that last year, or this year in that process where you thought the labor contract was too expensive. That's the place.
Lisa?
Yeah, John, I wanted to react to your comment about having this sooner rather than later. I really feel that this is kind of an ideal time for the Budget Committee. We've got new budget committees, Marty's well in the flow, but members who would have an opportunity to meet the department heads outside of that intense budget cycle that we get into in November, December, and January. And also to hear some of the dialogue, hear the questions that are raised, and hear them answered well ahead of the time when we get those 7 and 8 inch thick notebooks that we have to absorb. So, did I hear you say that you're more interested in having it sooner because?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
I kind of feel that way
I
as
think
well.
you had
Perhaps we
that.
could,
you
we
have
could
it-
draft a letter to Dave Karen, and maybe we could spend the next coming months, instead of adjourning until like August, maybe we could invite 1 or 2 of the department heads on each meeting up for the coming months, and until we get our budget books.
Well, generally, the town budget book comes out at the beginning of
Right before
November.
Thanksgiving.
Well, before we
The
get into
town?
the budget books, though,
Okay,
because that's
right.
gonna be another whole issue, could we have a kind of an agenda or a format for these meetings? You're gonna wanna be meeting with, could we have a list of people? Because I know overtime is an issue for both the fire and the police, so I'm assuming we would want to have them, I mean, how do we wanna structure those?
Well, I
exactly?
imagine that's what we would, I would send a letter to Dave Karen, and I'd ask,
Yeah.
maybe on the next Thursday of the next month, we could meet with the department head for the fire department,
Okay.
and then the next month, we could meet with the.
And we should have,
and we
I
could
think,
just
questions
take
for
care of
them
that one
too.
thing.
Sure.
Well, and I certainly
I agree.
think, we'd have to come up with specific
You're right.
information you'd want to hear. I would assume when the fire chief, because then he's going to say, well, we tried to fix this, and the taxpayers voted it down with this year. They tried to put more people on and get rid of some of the overtime, it
You know,
didn't happen.
I don't know about that. I think
You
when
know.
we asked the fire
chief about it this year, what he tried to say was it was actually cheaper to pay people overtime than
Which they
hire more
did,
firemen.
but he's already
As
publicly
crazy as it
said.
sounds,
Well,
as
because there's no
crazy as it
benefits.
sounds, it's true.
That's why part-time would do it,
'Cause
there'd be
you're
no
not paying
benefits for part-time.
Benefits and-
But that, it's a contract thing.
And if we start with that dialogue earlier, we'll have a better template to explain it to people who are questioning us
Yeah.
and have a strong position. I mean, I think not only do the department heads and the folks that come before us have to educate us, but we have a duty to educate the taxpayers who are curious enough and involved enough to talk to us. You know,
But I mean, when you say that.
20
on
and
top of
one.
Just the fire department and the police department, do you want like, all the smaller things like Janos in here and want to talk with them as well?
I would envision just, department heads, Chief Hart, Chief McCaffrey,
Janos.
Janos. I mean, those are folks that I think we can have the dialogue, and if there's somebody they want to defer to, that's fine, that they feel is, in their department who's better able to explain it. But I mean, what Marty talks about is, maybe it is a better fiscal deal to pay these people overtime, but let's do the math.
what it is.
Yeah, let's look at it. I mean, that's our due diligence, and it's easier to do it now than it is in November and December, when we have those two big budget books to wade through.
Yeah,
I mean,
so,
that's always been frustrating to me.
And I guess the other thing that frustrated me this year, and we went through God knows how many meetings and how late they were. The budget we passed still has overtime underfunded in both budgets.
Right.
So that means there's still other lines that aren't going to get spent that we budgeted money for. And I don't understand how we can fix that, but I feel like the town and the town needs to fix it. And I don't know
You
how
have to
we can do
squeeze it
that.
from somewhere else.
You have to, I mean, you know there may be $1 million in there for supplies, but at least 500,000 is going overtime.
yeah.
And it's like that every year. I just wish there was some way we could fix it. And I don't know what the answer is. I
So
truly
perhaps
don't.
if we have an April, or from what I'm understanding from people is we're gonna have an April meeting,
Mhm.
perhaps that one should be Dave Karen, and we
Right.
should bring these to him. And
Yeah.
how we would like to meet with each of the department heads, and
Mhm.
maybe we could set a schedule knowing May we'll meet with Chief Hart, June we will meet with Chief McCaffrey, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
I'm
So
good with
you
that.
want to do one department head per meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I believe it's only 3 or 4 department heads, so I mean, that should take us right through, and maybe give us a month or two to.
Is there
Do we-
even really?
Do we have that issue on
Is
the
there
school
enough?
side? I mean, like,
Yeah.
buildings and grounds, or, I mean, is overtime an issue at all on that side?
I
Not
think on the-
teachers,
I
but,
think on the school side, you pretty much get Nate Greenberg, and you.
right,
get to
right,
see
but I'm
him
just saying, that might
time
not,
after time after
they
time.
might not
Not that
have
I'm aware of.
the same overtime issues. There may be a select set of employees that have it with, you have ramp up for school opening, you have the support staff. I don't know,
Well,
I
they hire
can't,
students for that.
right, I can't imagine it is on that side, but the only thing I'll say about April is, I gotta check the calendar, but we might fall in school vacation week, so
Oh.
I don't know who's gonna, I got 3 little kids that are, so I know that that's
That
gonna,
might be the, so
And you
maybe
do.
we'd wanna do
Sounds
the
like a
week
personal
before.
problem to me.
right, so.
I thought we were all gonna send them over to see Uncle Tom.
But DPW too, really, the overtime for DPW is mostly driven by
Storms.
snowstorms.
Storms. Well, not
They
just
shouldn't have had an
snowstorms
issue this
now.
year.
That's right.
It could be
That's
the
how we're
rain
paying for
and
the
the rain.
overtime. for
That's
the
right,
police
this year,
department
the
and
salt
fire
and the
Oh.
snow budget.
Very good.
So now, could I just, for my own clarification, what is it that we're going to be is Dave Karen, is it necessary to have an entire meeting to address Dave Karen?
No, I think it's one component of a meeting, just to, and maybe that's the only thing on the agenda, but just to have a dialogue, have him tell us what the trends are, and what his concerns are, and so that we can ask some questions and educate ourselves, and start thinking about this earlier.
Okay, so we're using him kind of as a background to set.
Maybe that's the
set
starting
the
point, and
premise.
then,
Okay, okay,
and then we
I
talk to
understand.
department heads. I mean, I'm throwing it out there just to
Yeah.
kind of,
I think that's the correct way to go. Have
Okay.
them in either April, May, June, whatever sequence that is gonna fit for everybody or for the most people.
well, and I just think in hierarchy, we, on the town side, we start with Dave. I mean, it's only showing him respect that,
Okay.
he's overseeing those department heads, and I don't want to overstep him,
And you're right, there's a lot of questions we don't get to ask Dave during the process.
But besides,
because-
do we need to notify the town council too? Or do we, I don't know. I mean, Dave's their boss, but
Yeah.
they're Dave's boss.
Exactly. Well, I would say yes.
Yeah.
Whether it's mandated, it's certainly courteous, and
It would be courtesy.
right, but with their blessing, I think that.
Mhm.
and-
What's
and-
Have they
courtesy,
elected
town
each
council,
other?
do those 2 words work?
Ouch.
Hey, they
Seems
can't
to me
all
to
be
be
the
an
fun
oxymoron,
committee.
isn't it?
You're on fire
It's because he missed that fun deliberative session.
Has the town council elected their
matter?
officers yet?
Nothing,
Yeah.
nothing.
It's Monday night.
True.
I'll wait till Monday.
I could make an educated guess, but
Does anybody else have anything on the department heads? Would I assume that everybody would like to meet with
Tony
the
does.
department heads? No, Tony, no, sit, no. Yeah, go ahead, come on up.
motion to override the chair.
Can I add in one more thing? You know,
Is it about Tony?
no.
All right, okay,
No.
good.
You know, last year, I think we got wrapped up in one meeting and some people came and it wasn't on the agenda. I think for this year, anyone who wants to come here should be able to speak. And frankly, if somebody's coming in on a particular item that they want to educate us on, or they want some answers on, they should go to the front of the agenda. I've come to plenty of other meetings in this room and waited till 11 at night because the one item, I had to sit through 5 things. So I think if people give us some advance notice, they want to come in and talk about a
Yeah,
certain
but
issue.
a
top-
large portion of people want to talk about one thing in particular.
Well, we did, towards, you know, when we got rolling in budget, there were certain people that did come in here and had
We
points
almost
of.
had 3 people in.
3 people, I think, was our record.
And one's
So-
on the board now.
So,
We'll see the impression you made, Chris?
yeah, but I don't think that was intended, and it came across, I think, in a different fashion than what the intent was. But I you know, I think if anyone is willing to come in here, they should be given the microphone.
I think the concern at that time was one
The timing.
individual had been on for 45 minutes, and we had meetings that were running until 1 in the morning.
Yep.
So that combination seemed to be an exigency we hadn't run into before.
While we're on this same subject, can we, and I'm not the chair, but can we get a consensus of the board that we will not take any final votes this year until our deadline and not an artificial deadline set by the town and the school?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I
I
think that does
don't
make
have
a
a
lot of
problem with
sense.
that.
I mean, we can do, you know, if it's the last night and we need to meet for 7 hours,
Yeah.
then we need to do that, but I just feel like
I don't think we're gonna
Best
be,
intentions
I don't
is
think
here,
we're
but-
gonna be asked to comply with
Yeah.
the
I think-
deadline
I think
because.
what we
I just
need
don't
this
wanna go
year
back to the
is
school
for us
board
to
next
tell
year
us
and
what
ask
our
questions again.
day actually is.
right.
And not tell us it's Friday and then go, oh, but wait, you have
And
till
plan that,
Tuesday, and
that's
then,
all.
oh, wait, Thursday.
I just hated that we
that
had to go
kinda
back
happened last
and,
year.
I know John hated the revote too. I just would rather we got all the information, then voted and.
Well, yeah, I think we are,
Go ahead.
Thank you. 2 things, and I was just thinking out there, if you're gonna call the department heads, if I was a department head, I would wanna know what the topic was gonna be, rather than coming in blind. and then-
That's why I would want to
then
have
get
the
the-
meeting with Dave Karen first.
right.
So we could arrange the meetings with the department heads, and we
Yeah.
could let them know the information that we were looking for, so, because it would be pointless for us to get them here, and they don't have the information to give
Exactly,
us.
and then it's gonna cause
Right.
another meeting, and it's gonna cause you just extra hours that you don't need. So I
That
was
is
just thinking
that would be the point of having the meeting with
Sure.
Dave.
The other thing is, Marty needs to make a disclaimer, because you were having this conversation about department heads, and then Marty said, well, I'm a department head. You all were talking about the town department heads, and Marty does not work for the town. And people
State.
need to know that, because I'm sure the way it came
Oh.
over on the TV was it sounded like you were
Didn't think of it.
saying,
Right.
I'm a
To all
department
9
head, but you
people at
don't
home who
work
are
for the town.
watching, Marty does not
Yeah,
work
for
for
all
the town.
7 people that were watching, one of them's a reporter.
You'll let Marty clarify.
I saw you go into another room, actually.
Yeah, so
I'm a department head for the state of New Hampshire at the State Hospital in Concord, so I'm a state employee.
Okay, I think that will help. Thank you.
And I think that when we do talk to Dave, and to the extent Nate as well, the message is that we want a dialogue. It's not here, cross-examination or inquisition. It's more, tell us what your problems are, so we can kind of ask the right questions, and we can look at them.
Maybe they could turn our attitude about it around.
Right, I'm all in favor of a presentation. I mean, Janos comes in and does some presentations on the roads.
And he brings cookies.
And he brings food, yeah, exactly. So, I don't think it has to be perceived as you being called to court. I think it's more of an open discussion that we get going earlier, because so many times, some of these department heads said, I wish we had been able to talk about this way back at the
I'm
beginning.
sure it seems like an inquisition too, when you're in the rush of the heat of the
Right.
budget season.
And and they're working on the budget too.
And absolutely, and and I've read it, I think the same quote in 3 or 4 different articles now was that, especially on the firefighters, the budget committee didn't ask the right questions. And that's why the majority voted against it. And I don't think that's true at all, and I voted for it. But the people who voted against it had their reasons. I think they asked the questions multiple times.
Well,
I mean,
Well, not only
Yeah,
that,
I
but
mean,
if
I
you
think-
get- If you get them in here and you ask them the questions, you're giving the general public plenty of time to come
Right.
back with you and offer their input
and
on
more
it
questions.
when we come around again to the budget season.
But if somebody's coming in here and doing a presentation and saying you didn't ask me the right question, I have a problem with that. You're here doing a presentation. If there was something that you feel that we needed to know or that we were not fully briefed on, that's your responsibility, and it's in the statute. So to shift it and say you didn't ask the right question sounds a little.
Was that like a department head who had said that, or a?
It was.
There was
Well,
a quote
it was
attributed to a fire department personnel in the
official.
paper this week.
Official.
And I'm not gonna.
No.
I don't know if it's accurate or not. I mean, I've been misquoted in the press, so I'm not.
No,
judging.
sir.
Yeah, believe it or not. So,
My only point for bringing that up was that, we're going to have these discussions. If there's questions that they feel we should be asking, the public can let us know ahead of time. The department heads can bring stuff they want to talk to us about, I don't think it fully lies on us, so I think you made the same point. That's all.
yes. Yep, I agree with you.
Anything else, Lisa, Marty?
No.
Chris? When you say that you want the timely delivery of the budget books, I think that we've asked this in the past.
Every
and-
year.
And they pretty much tell you, you get what you get and you don't get upset.
I've asked 3 years in a row for the school not to release its budget 2 days before Thanksgiving, and then have that following Monday, the first budget hearing, generally on personnel. I think that's really totally unfair to the taxpayer. And I've asked them a couple of times saying, who's going to look at that budget book over the holiday? I'm sorry, but nobody is. So either they push it back to around Veterans Day, somewhere around their release, or start the budget hearings a week later. I know that's pushing it, compressing it, but, I just think that's,
I mean, all we can do is ask, but I can tell you, at my couple of years now on the budget committee, you're gonna get it when you get it.
Yeah, and it's not just the school. I mean, the town,
Both
we
sides.
get the town earlier, but we get it on that 8-hour marathon session day
but
to
the
go
fr-
through while everyone's
But the
talking.
frustrating thing is the lines and the categories are gonna be the same. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just a
they
matter
just
of the
fill in the
numbers.
number.
Where do do you not have a sense of where we're gonna be going up or where we're gonna be out of sync with last year?
And then the school will say, why didn't you ask that? Didn't you know that? Well, no, I didn't have an opportunity to get to that.
I asked,
Page 932.
yeah, I've asked several times, and, they considered it at one time, and unfortunately, I couldn't stay
I
too
guess all we
late.
can
so
do is
it was
ask.
good.
Yeah.
All we can do is ask, that's right. Unless we're setting the budget, we have no power to get the books.
I had a citizen that I saw at the polls that said if they don't give you the contract in time, then you should just say, we're voting no, if you don't get it to us in time. I mean, I said, you cannot do that. I mean, that's impossible. But I mean, the frustration is, getting the time to be able to look at this stuff is important. That's why we're here, so.
Well, the contract depends on the negotiations. They don't always go smoothly.
Oh, yeah.
And they may go to the last minute. I'm not so much worried about that, because that's a give and take process. What I'm talking about is the main school budget.
Right,
where
the books.
They just set up another column and it says, this is FY '13, and they start filling in the numbers.
When you get, the
Yeah.
contract's not actually in the budget book. That was a whole different hit to you.
Yeah, that's, you never can tell what's gonna happen with those. You can't predict when they're gonna be finished.
Do we, as a committee, review the ongoing budget as to how it is falling in place?
Well,
or-
and a budget was approved, and they're gonna follow, and they're gonna come back at the beginning of this next budget season, and they're gonna tell us that they had an overage, or they had an underage, or they saved money here, or there's a reserve fund of money that they didn't spend, and they'll tell you how they did with their budget. The town's gonna come back and tell you they way overspent their overtime. The school's gonna come back and say they did a great job and come back under default.
Okay.
But yes, they'll come back and tell you how they did it.
But I think Bill's question, and I've always felt the same way, is can we get a briefing as to, before we get to that process, whether it's summer or early fall, here's where we're seeing the trends, or, because all we get is a static picture. Here is what our budget is for the coming year, click in the budget book. We have no,
Right.
We have no sense of what numbers are developing,
Because the
because,
budget we just voted on goes into effect July 1.
Exactly.
And we're talking about having meetings in April, May, June.
Well,
with-
that might be a question we
with-
could ask
With what are
Dave.
you gonna do with, next year's budget? Well, this year's budget hasn't even gone in place yet.
That might be a question we could ask Dave, if we could, if there's a possibility that we could get the previous month for our next meeting to look at.
You know,
it.
because
Have
you know
they,
the FY12 budget for Public Works is
Do they do
way
it?
down
Way
right now.
down.
You know that.
but you know, the department heads must have a sense of we're over budget in certain areas, and we don't know that until we get to the budget review process. I mean, if we had kind of a flavor, like overtime or, certain costs are escalating, the fuel costs, for instance, this is how much we are out of sync. We would start looking at those issues, maybe asking different questions, more questions, if we knew something that was bothering the department heads. That's why I think the dialogue's important, and not just,
And I really think it all starts with Dave, because at the same time, I don't know how much
Absolutely.
stuff we'd like to see. We might be out of bounds,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Is it possible that you might want to invite Sue Hickey to be at that following meeting? Because she's certainly the one
Finance
with a
person,
deep
sure.
background on the finances and would be able to tell us trends. So what I hear you saying is that you're interested in kind of making an assessment of the current fiscal year's budget and see how that's unfolding.
And you're right about, somebody said something about the scope. I mean, the scope of our authority is in the future. I mean, looking at the next budget after the coming one. But it would be helpful to know, as part of preparing for that, where the trends and the problems exist now. That's the point I'm making. We can't micromanage the current budget or the one that we've already just put in, that's going into place July
It
1.
would be strictly informational.
It would exactly, you got it.
I have a quick question. Does the town do any kind of like a quarterly report, first quarter, second, third, fourth quarter? Many businesses do that, they tell you what the line items are. Does the
Well, they're gonna
town
have
do
to-
anything? The only thing I remember from the town council side was that, every so often they report anything spent over, I think Pauline asked about anything over $15,000 for the year, whatever, just to see what the big number items. But I don't recall any time, first quarter, second quarter results. I mean, generally speaking, department heads will track that just to see where they're
I
at.
think that, again, is probably either a question
And I
for
don't
Dave
know
or Sue.
what role that, the committee would play in that kind of stuff, unless, just for information purposes.
That's probably a futile attempt at trying to track that because of the way that's set up, where they'll take money from whatever to pay for whatever ongoing.
And then they
And
can,
so it's, even if 100,000 is designated for this, it may not go there.
right, it's
It may be-
bottom line budget.
So that's kind of a tough scenario as to,
Mhm.
but the idea of talking to the department heads, or Dave, or Sue
Again, you
Hickey,
can ask.
is to get the trends of what is happening. Why is, when we thought this amount of money was the right amount, and
Yeah.
we got, 90,000 left over, or we've already spent 150, maybe some trends on that. But I think the way the budget's set up, I don't see where it's gonna help, because they'll just move the money to wherever they need it at the time.
Yeah, but if they move the money from one place to another one, then that particular thing suffers. Something's not getting funded to fund something else.
But it also means they have to have a
Something to
tracking
show it.
system, because they're gonna
Well,
know
absolutely
they have to
they have
take
to,
that.
right.
So I'm sure we can get reports or something if
Yeah.
we wanted them. I'm sure we could.
Bill may be our go-to guy, with the finance background, but, they gotta submit to a public audit. I mean, we got an accounting team that comes in here and does that. I think maybe we wanna cross-reference some of the
Yeah, but
information.
By the time the accounting team comes in and is doing the audit for the current budget
Correct.
year closing, we're deciding on what the budget's gonna be for,
Right, but like we were
years
saying,
now.
informational wise, I mean,
Yeah.
if we're looking at something and saying, why is this so much, larger than what we're seeing in the current budget? It's informational only. I don't think we have authority to go back and, kind of micromanage it, nor do we want to. I mean,
no,
it's-
but, I said, it's good information.
Informational, you simply like
To
to
get
know
those
if we're
trends.
on track.
Right, exactly.
That's your job.
Did you have something? Anybody else have anything on that?
We're good.
All right, so develop a method to assess relative economic standing of Londonderry taxpayer. Now, this, I know, concerns Tony out here.
And you're right, that's the one I put
This is
forward.
Marty's.
And this is an answer to Tony's letter about who do you represent? Which spectrum of the income cycle do you represent? The lower end, the higher end, or the middle? I'm not looking for an exact number that says, oh, like the Dow Jones, it's 13,000 today, tomorrow it's 12,000. Say, well, there's the number, it's going up, so we can afford it. Kind of a sense of, where the taxpayers at. Because I brought this up a lot of times in all the budget cycles, saying, on my way to work, I've seen so many houses that are foreclosed, this, that. So, and everybody has a different opinion on what they see, as Tony does. And, and we obviously travel in different circles, because the questions I get, is always, why does, how come if the enrollment's going down, the costs are going up? And actually this year, the school did a very good job in explaining that, when we were in the second marathon of the budget hearings.
Yep.
And that was a great explanation, the first time, that they really explained what's driving it. And I said, fine, that's, I can accept that answer. And that's what I'm kind of looking for. Do we look at the regional unemployment rate? Do we look at the value of the homes on a regional basis? Are they going up, down? Do we look at economic development in Londonderry? One of the questions I had is, in the past year, did the tax base of Londonderry increase, decrease, or stay the same? That tells you whether tax revenues are coming in, are the home value rising, falling? It's kind of it's not a clear picture, it's like looking through Jell-O, but it kind of gives you a sense of,
It's clear Jell-O.
just to kind of give you a sense of what's happening in the town.
John?
No, I was gonna say, would that include looking at the assessed property? Because I know assessments are probably on.
Well, the assessments, they do that they
Well,
go
it's on a
through all the
cycle.
properties every
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah.
So that changes, with time. I don't know, I just threw it out there and saying, is there anything out there, given all the folks we have here, you may have seen something that may be useful information. I don't know, it may not be. It may be just your feel of what's going on economically in the area, and that's what you go with.
Do you have specific,
No,
indicators?
nothing right now.
But
no.
something for us to think about
Yeah.
moving forward?
Yeah.
Well, and if the assessments all went down, the taxes all go up too. Which is important to remember.
Right,
Everybody's
it's a
house gets
seesaw,
set down, everybody pays more taxes.
Well,
That's all, it just
yeah.
changes.
It just changes the
money
everybody
per
says, my
thousand.
house is
No,
assessed too high.
no, I understand that part of it. If the assessment goes down, the tax rate goes up to
Right.
balance out, because you have to raise that money that you voted for to pay for the taxes.
Right.
And if, if the taxes come in higher because we've got business taxes come, then your assessment will go, your rate will go down.
Right.
No, I understand that part.
So,
I think Marty has a good idea. I think it's,
Could you state your name and your address?
sorry, Tony DeFrancesco. I can't remember where I live. It's getting late. My meds are wearing off. So Marty has a good idea, but you have to be careful what you do with the information that you get.
Right.
And I know you know that. I'm just stating
Mhm.
it for the public. Because even if the town comes up, I'm making this up, 90% below the poverty level, that doesn't mean anything in the voting box. Those people still may all support
Sure.
a new fire
You're
truck.
absolutely right. It is, again, an informational thing that I
Right,
think he's looking
and
for.
so, and Lisa hit it on the head earlier when she said, you kind of have all the information that you need. The public spoke at the voting booth a couple of weeks ago, and that's the most information, that's the information that's most important at the time. But I, as a taxpayer, as one person, I would be interested in seeing that study and see what it looks like. And I, as one person, would certainly be interested in that. As we all know, it's not necessarily going to mean anything at the voting booth, and it doesn't necessarily mean you should vote a certain way, one way or the other.
And this, again, my favorite thing to say, it looks like a question for Dave.
Our budget is $1.
Yes. Did you get
who's-
your 18 cents?
I did not, but who's gonna do that study for us? I mean,
No,
I'm
It's not a
not
study, I'm
scoffing
not-
at it, I'm just saying, we get an intern or,
No, Marty's
you know.
gonna do it for free.
Oh,
no,
well,
I'm
okay,
not.
then I'm a fan.
No,
Oh, no,
believe
no,
me,
yeah, oh, yeah.
I'm not looking to spend the money
I
or,
nominate Marty.
I'm, just take the information that's out there.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
tons of statistics, can't speak, out there that you can pull from various things. There's the There's the Fed book that comes out and talks about the regions. You have the state that talks about the state
Yeah,
in
yeah,
various
just collate
segments.
it.
So, I don't know, I just threw it out there as an idea. It may not go anywhere. It may not be any useful information, as Tony says. I'm not looking for something that says, oh yeah, here's the economic indicators, and it's gonna tell me to do this. That's not what I'm looking for. I think that would be, I think you're right, it would be dangerous to do it that way. You still have to put your opinion into it, but just kind of a relative thing. Just another piece of information.
Anybody else have anything on that? All right, this time I'd like to, take people's liaison assignments. Does anybody have a particular they'd like to be on?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I've been serving on the master plan steering committee. I'd like to continue that into the coming year. We're coming into, we're not doing liaison reports, but we're coming into a very interesting time where, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Where we're going to start having charrettes and public hearings.
That's charrettes, right, not Tourette's?
Not Tourette's, charrettes, no shrieking. So that will be coming up. I hope that people will keep their eyes on the paper for that. And we're working on a town survey. So there's a lot of information that's going to be coming forward to the community in the next couple of months. So I'd like to continue with the master plan steering committee, and my other responsibility is the safety dispatch services committee in whatever form they're going to take now.
I'd like to nominate.
Did you have?
I was with, doing a planning board, would continue to do that if you wanted.
We didn't actually vote last year, just a consensus.
No.
Yeah,
right?
we just took a consensus and people wanted that. And is that fine with everybody?
What other committees are there?
I mean, there's the certain town committees, whatever there is on the town, as well as there's the school committee, town council liaison.
School board,
CIP.
town council
CIP.
liaison.
I checked
planning
last year's
board.
minutes, we did town, school, and CIP. I think master plan
CI
came
yeah,
after that,
CIP.
right?
Capital improvement, that's a great.
You and I were on
committee.
open space. That was one of the
Yeah,
liaisons
open
together.
space last
You and I
year.
were on that
Yeah,
together, Marty.
I was on there,
Town
yeah.
council, or were you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still
And,
on Heritage
I
and Master.
I have the,
I'm trying to figure out where the time is.
Marty's on master plan, but you're there without being liaison, so.
I'm on Dog Park Study Committee, if anybody
that's
No,
awesome.
no.
wants to
Get
take that
that
away
thing
from me.
going, will you?
No dog.
Zero tax impact, that's the goal.
That's
So we
what
have the
they like
master
to hear.
plan,
We're not
the
saying
safety
anything about
division, the
dogs.
planning board, the CIP, the town council, the school board, open space, and we have the dog park
No,
committee, because
open
that's very important.
spaces.
Somebody wanna join me on
They
it?
said the report, didn't we?
Well, yeah, but they were also talking about reopening the group
Oh, okay.
for some other work that
Oh.
Michael Speltz asked, and I forgot exactly what it was. What was the other committee assignments? The other
CIP.
Town,
Yeah.
school.
town?
Was anybody opposed to Lisa on the master plan?
No.
No.
I'll volunteer. to
Lisa's
be-
on the master plan.
Safety
Second,
dispatch.
you want to be the,
No, I was gonna say I'll volunteer to be the CIP voting member again this year. I was last year.
is that all right
Yeah,
with everyone
anybody-
for
Yeah.
Chris?
There, you do need an alternate
alternate.
for that, because both times I've been alternate, I got to vote because people weren't there, so
Which one?
the CIP.
CIP.
CIP is 2 meetings.
Was everyone all right with Lisa on the safety board too?
Yes.
Mike, is that something you
Tom
might
on the
want to do,
planning
the
board.
CIP?
Yeah, I could be an alternate CFP
Yeah,
or
alternate,
whatever.
because, and if you're available that night, frequently people don't show up, so.
And it's only a couple meetings.
Does anybody want to be the alternative on the master plan committee?
I can do that since I'm on it
Yeah,
anyway.
he's on it anyway, that's a great idea, double duty. Good.
Would anyone like to be the liaison to the town council? Or do you think that should probably be me?
I think it's usually the chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Todd did school last
He
year.
did the
Oh, he
school.
chose to do school.
You want to do town, I'll do school?
Okay.
Okay.
And would anyone like to be the
Daniel
alternate
and
to
the
town?
Lions Den.
Isn't that funny? I am Daniel
I'll be
What-
the alternate for the school,
for the school.
if you'd like. I don't want to do
Anyone
this.
like to be the alternate to the town? Not everybody jump in at once.
I'll do the
Tell me,
alternate.
you interested?
The what?
Bill?
I'll do
What
it.
was it?
Oh,
Does Bill have one yet?
Bill will do that. That sounds good.
So we have the open space, then Marty likes that, does he?
Yeah, and I can do alternate for that also.
Okay. And we will keep John on the dog park, because I think only John and I, oh, you have a dog too, don't you, Chris?
I do.
I've gone to the dogs, yeah. According to many.
John,
We don't have any representation on the library trustees that I know of, right?
Did they even fill all the spaces on
Yes, that was right.
Yeah, they hate us anyway.
Have we ever had a liaison? Have we ever had a
We
liaison?
didn't have a
I
liaison.
don't think so.
I mean,
I don't think they want us there.
well, technically, they're a standalone body.
They are, they
You know?
are. Well, they have a town council liaison, I think. I know they do, because
I think they do, yeah.
one infamous
They've come in,
counselor
the
did propose
trustees-
coffee at one point.
The trustees came in to address the town council too.
Yell at us. It's nice. So for Marty, I'll tell you, we have the master plan committee, Marty. And that's Lisa, with you as the alternate.
Okay.
We have the safety division, we only have Lisa. Because, you know, when I think Lisa, I think
There should
safety,
be an
that's all we
alternate.
need.
It should be an alternate.
Who would like to be an alternate on the safety?
Isn't that committee done?
Is it all done?
There's gonna be a follow-through of implementation. I thought, if they're gonna continue, I would,
If they
do
can.
No, I thought they said they were gonna status quo.
Yeah,
for
wasn't it
now.
a status
Wasn't it
quo
a
decision?
That's what I read last, yeah. Nothing.
So we'll wait and see. The planning board, would anybody like to alternate on the planning board?
Well, I go to him, a lot of the meetings, I can do
that's Tom's,
Right, I have him as the.
and then Marty as the
the
alternate.
alternate, yeah,
You're gonna be out every night.
I'm out now every night.
So on the CIP, we have Chris, and we have
Bill,
Billy's. And on the town, I'll do the town, and Bill will alternate that.
good.
And on the school, we have John, and Chris can alternate that. Open space, we have Marty and Lisa, and we have John in the dog park. Woof, woof. Good stuff. How's that looking, by the way?
Is it done yet?
Slow and steady wins the race.
After this planning board meeting, anyway.
The only other order of business I would have for the evening is, would you guys like to have the next meeting on April 19th, as the next week, the 26th, would be during April vacation for those
Oh.
with children?
Oh, I think that's a great idea.
That's gonna be just with
Nineteenth's
Dave.
fine with me.
I will send a letter to Dave, and I'll copy us all on that, and we'll see if he can make it for that one, and we can come up with a list of questions that we'd like to ask him.
April, what was it?
And make sure there's no reply all to any of these emails, because we don't wanna end up on the front page of Londonderry Times for having an illegal meeting.
Reply all. And if everyone could just make sure that they have their email addresses.
Oh, you know, do we want to send a sheet around before everyone splits? Start with Bill over there. All the contact information,
I
phones,
know I
alternate
have
phones,
Chris and
emails,
John.
alternate emails.
Yeah, it needs to be on the
Yeah.
website too. Margot needs
I
to,
have yours.
And Chris is
But
my
I would-
friend on Facebook, so.
absolutely, and
I'm
Tetris.
gonna Do the list.
Did you
I was
Tetris
gonna
me?
say, I'll send it.
Okay.
I make a motion.
You're the secretary.
I'm going to the Hunger Games at
This is gonna
midnight. I
kill
have
me.
hours to go.
Make a motion to
Hire
adjourn.
somebody.
We're just writing down
It's not fiscal year.
email addresses, and then we can make a motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tony.
Hey, I didn't adjourn yet.
Close enough.
He
Close enough.
adjourned.
Thank you.
And in this lull, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to bring up an issue that we raised last year and hopefully emphasize it again this year.
I think that
Please.
as far as this budget committee went on, we realized that we all had many issues, Lisa.
We had many issues, this is true, but one of them was encouraging voters, as Tony mentioned earlier this evening, please come and get involved and engaged in the process earlier than January, when we are under the gun and it's really too late to.
So we can do it, we can do a lot more if you come and express your concerns to us before the voting,
Yeah.
instead of burning us in effigy after.
But the December and January meetings are so
Well,
important.
I have a suggestion. Any consideration to putting out a booth at Old Home Days?
I'm
Is
already-
anybody willing
We only
to,
have $1 budget, Marty.
is anybody willing to sit there and listen to people
I am already
Come
the
to you.
DJ for the Old Home Day as well.
DJ?
Yes, that would be a disc jockey.
Something tells me a dunk tank with the budget committee would be a very popular
We could raise a lot
draw
of money
this
for the
year.
town.
Yeah, we could solve the budget dilemma with that, I believe.
Yes, we could make
Depends
quite,
on who you stick in the tank.
Tom and I.
Not me, what did I do?
Just wait, you'll do it.
well, that's a time we have quite a few people downtown, they're coming through. I know in the afternoon, mostly the young people take it over, but even then, that's okay too. They can ask questions, they may want to
I don't
find
need
out
to
what's
write
going
mine, I know
on.
mine.
And, I don't think a lot of groups in town utilize that, the old home days as a way to get the word out. You know, I tried pushing that with open space and a couple others, but, you know.
I think it's a good
it'd be
idea.
worthwhile to, just to think about and how we would set it up.
Will we be distributing, you know, informational packages, or just there to answer questions, or?
I think what Dan was saying, you know, bring the concerns to us, listen. I would say just listen,
You know, I mean, I was,
versus,
Run
Giving-
loops of the meeting.
yeah. No, I was disappointed
We
this
want
year
people
too.
to come.
I was disappointed this year, and I said that to some people at the polls, you know, compared to years past, I feel like there was a lot less press coverage about the elections this year.
I tell you
I
what, why don't we
really
have,
did.
why don't we have Marty march in the parade?
The other,
Secretary always do that?
the secretary, that's right, secretary.
They do now.
No, thank goodness.
The only other thing I would say too, going into this season, I feel like at the end of last season, some people took
What do I
some
need?
things personally
Name, address.
on the board, and I don't think we
Right,
have any
so-
need to do that. You know, I think we're gonna disagree, we all have our opinions, and that's good, but we're all still a friendly board, and we may disagree, but we all get together and have drinks 2 at a time at the end of the night, because we can't have a legal meeting.
as long as
Can't have
Lisa's
drinks during the
buying.
meeting?
As long
It's been
We
years, nobody
discussed that
told me.
last year, we were gonna have drinks during the meeting. We were gonna meet at a
The end of the
bar.
meeting, interesting.
We figured if we met at Whippersnappers, more people would come.
They always got lousy bands.
Well, that's something to think about for the next meeting.
Did you earn any
If we
money
were
for
gonna
that
do something like
endorsement?
that.
Sorry, Whippersnappers, 99, T-Bones. What else did I miss? Cafe
Concerned
Teresa,
about that
Homestead.
staffing there all day long.
Yeah.
It's a long, hot
Yeah.
day on Old Home Day, and to ask us to
Yeah.
be there
There's
for
other
8
things
hours or
happening, yeah.
so.
Well, there's
Yeah.
7 of us. It's an 8-hour day. That's an hour and 10 minutes each if you did something like that.
Well, hopefully we'd have a couple at a time available to.
It could be as simple as just putting up a sheet, you know, and saying, give us your question.
I think we should get the
Well,
town
that might
council
be
and school board to
interesting.
sit there too.
People heard us. All right, we had a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.